Trading the foreign exchange market carries high risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Trading on margin, utilizing leverage can carry an even higher level of risk that can lead to a complete loss of investment funds. So before deciding to trade the foreign exchange market or using any of our software alert products, you should carefully and diligently consider your personal investment objectives, level of experience, and risk tolerance. There is a possibility that you could potentially sustain significant loss. You should not invest any capital or trade that you cannot afford to lose. It is your responsibility to be aware of and understand all risks associated with foreign exchange trading and to seek professional advice from an independent certified financial advisor if you have any doubts. Auvoria Prime does not exercise trading authority over your trades. You and you alone exercise discretionary trading authority over every trade.
Midweek software strategy session. I am Steve Vetterl for once live. I had some technical difficulties on Saturday, so who knew that the expirations don't end to the end of the year in Zoom. We learned something new. Do me a favor, if somebody would please just let me know in the chat window if you could see my screen looking at the forexfactory.com website. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Q&A window is open for any questions that you may have, so forth. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So on the recorded call that I did on Saturday, I'm actually gonna, it's up in the back office. The team always renders it and then puts the videos up pretty quickly, which is great. What I'm gonna try and attempt to do this Saturday is, if many of you don't know, it's our huge event, Tennessee, our big momentum event, April 24th, which is this Saturday right here. So I'm gonna try and do it live from, if possible, the green room of the studio that we're in. So I think it would be kind of cool, right? Let's see if I could pull it off. So it's at essentially 1 p.m. my time, and I think the green room will be, kind of quiet. Well, let's hope. Or a lot of us have to be away from the actual production studio just from a noise perspective and all that. So see if I can pull it off. If not, the recording will be done at some point that day as well. So I'll just rip through it kind of like I did on Saturday. If you missed the recording, basically just talked about CAD events. CAD, GBP related, for that matter, maybe to a lesser degree, the Swiss has really been moving around. So I'm actually going to take a look at GBP CAD first, which is the big currency neo trades. But just a side note here, no news yesterday, obviously, but we've got some events coming up tomorrow, really going to affect CAD. And for what it's worth, anybody trading Neo out there, I know that Fernando and the team have decided to turn off mode 2. So if you're not sure what that is, it's just a little more aggressive setting mode inside the software outside of mode 1. So just note that. But we have some big Canadian news tomorrow. This will be an equivalency of a Humphrey Hawkins testimony. Same thing with the next day, the ECB press conference. So be very careful of these red folder events all this week for that matter. Keep in mind, this is Pacific time zone here. So, do your own synchronization, if you will. Just click the time up here and it'll synchronize. And then just click save settings. And then you're synced out. For that, just click on the back button or whatever. You get back into the Forex calendar. So now you're synced essentially with the 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can do that with your own time zone. So just keep that in mind. If you're ever interested and you want more of a deeper dive, you can always click on this folder. It'll tell you what's going on with a particular event. Most of the time, these big central bank events, they have a very canned, and in many cases, a pre-released set of notes for the meeting. So a lot of times they may not stray, but you never know. When you see something like this, press conference, right, in any format, you always got to be concerned. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of accepting manual trades during this period of time, with maybe an hour before, in some cases 2 hours after, especially since we've seen some higher volatility with some of the currencies. I mean, no surprise, right? I mean, outside of some of the movements in the CAD currency over the last month and a half, it's been a relatively quiet last 6 months, right? Haven't had any nutcase moves like we had the previous 6 with central banks, stimulus, and everything related to the pandemic and the shutdown of many economies. So The quietness, if you will, has been somewhat unseated of recent. That's why it's more important to take advantage and pay attention to these events. So Q&A window is open for anybody who's got any questions. Put them in the Q&A window, not the chat window. So let's take a look. S&P. I don't care about the 4-hour charts. Take a look at the daily. A little bit of a pullback to be expected. We broke from a cup of handle pattern, which I'm actually going to talk about on Saturday. This is a very powerful pattern that develops, and once it breaks, as long as you get some decent volume on something like that break, has a tendency to push a lift in, especially if it's followed by volume. Notice this whole break here has been followed by typically lower volume. So you always want to be on the lookout for that. And that applies to anything. You're trading commodities, equities, anything in the stock market, obviously, or equities, or certainly into currencies as well. And now that I've taken my first couple of trades in the crypto market as of a few days ago, maybe I'll be able to talk about some crypto at some point down the road, because it has been bananas in that area. So DXY daily chart. I think to get too much into this. Point is we at the naked, what's called naked POC, the POC, which is the point of control from the previous center line, if you will, was a complete reversal for the dollar. So I've been talking a lot about more than likely we're going to go up into this zone, hit a POC, which we did. It just stands for point of control, which is really just nothing more than a center point of time and volume, more than likely on this area, and it reversed. So we've dropped. Consequently, gold's lifted up, and many of the currencies tied to US dollar have increased in value. So generally, when something like this takes place, you'll see an opposite chart as we've lifted in euro back now into the zone, so forth. So I would expect us to bounce along in here, but sort of try to trend up, maybe test again this top. I don't know when, I don't know how, but it's really key that we move up into and stay under this area. Essentially that would be the DXY holding down here at 89.50, right? And for one of the questions I just got, make sure that you go into the Telegram channel for your, I don't know if you have Telegram, I would definitely, I have it on the desktop and I downloaded the app on my Android as well. And there's the group 4, the chat in there if you want to read along. You have to sift through lots of useless comments, which is the case for any chat window, but there's some nuggets in there you can pick up. Occasionally I'll rip through there, see if there's anything good coming out of it. That's where I caught that mode 2 turn off chat that's been fairly prevalent the last few days, just because of the lift that we're seeing in GBP CAD. See that move right here, guys? Remember, this is the daily chart. I switched over to GBP CAD right here. Very big move. Not like the biggest we've seen it, but this was last fall. I think as hopefully everybody in the UK gets everything straightened out and Brexit's an uneventful break, if you will, almost like an island breaking off from a continent floating out into the ocean, right? So hopefully that's an uneventful, but that statement is unfortunately fraught with risk, because there almost always is risk in any currency when a country's trying to break away from some ruling group, or in this case, the European Union. I can't say that the charts with this, because a lot of people are like, well, hey, Steve, did you see this comment? And my only concern is that I look at a lot of different time frames, and I've dropped down to the 4-hour time frame. Now, when we broke this area, I figured we would go up and first test this area, which we did in essentially 1 4-hour period. So I think a lot got caught off of this. And ideally, this is really when I personally just don't accept any kind of short trades. So if I have MAV versions of something and it's shooting me out trades to approve, and I see this, or I know that this chart broke this, I'm not going to accept that trade, because you're stepping in front of the freight train, and it's just a difficult thing to do. There are a lot of really good traders out there that will fade these kind of moves, but you have to be exceptionally good at what you do. it's best to just buy the break, right? Now, if you're not looking at a 4-hour chart, you may not have seen this, but this is where what I think I do like about Fernando and his team is they were on this. They're like, oh, well, we've had a break from this. Maybe we should turn mode 2 off. So it's not tempted to keep taking trades as this just gets stretched out, which I don't think, and then you have almost always a pullback because this was such a tight snap to or I should say a big stretch out to the rubber band. Just picture bands following this entire move down, right? You always have these, there's many different types of bands. There's Keltner channels, there's Bollinger bands, there's standard deviation bands. It doesn't really matter what bands you're using. The point is that they get stretched, come up against a particular area. And then you have a snapback. What happens after that? Especially if it's a tight pullback, you still got an area to more than likely travel to. And we now essentially have hit it. And I don't know how strong this area is going to be. So again, I still would just be unwilling to accept shorts up here because there's probably a fair amount of traders, institutional traders, larger traders that have been caught off guard by this move. And when you have big chunks of what's called other time frame money running from a trade, you don't really want to step in and be the hero in a case like that. So you look at on the weekly chart, ideally, this whole 77-40-ish area is where we're more than likely headed, provided we continue with strength, right? You always want to think also, which sounds strange, but again, risk management, a lot I'll talk about on Saturday. What if Steve's wrong, right? What do we do? So this is the most likely outcome, statistically speaking, reversion to the mean speaking. So I typically will go with that, and where but forecasters, many of us are wrong. I think it's just trying to give you guys an idea of where things are going to go. I certainly could be wrong on that as well. So take it with a grain of salt, and obviously only trade with money that you can afford to lose. GBP USD real quick. Daily chart first. Holding on this initial area, which has been a fairly strong line. We poked above it, came right back down inside it. So it means the sold zone is still fairly strong. Looks like we may want to, if the pound continues strength, to bust through this area. It's possible. So what else do I want to say on the CAD situation? Let's take a look at CAD CHF. Obviously, we've had a huge move up in CAD. It's reverting back to the mean. Those softwares and those that had patience through many of these days, especially if you were stuck in shorts as this thing was ripping up in whatever manual or automated version of the software you're using, the patience paid off, right? It's taking some patience though. What are we looking at? 20 days here? More? Something like that. So it's patience has really been a virtue on this one. Now we've clobbered through, and quite frankly, we were overstretched here anyway on the daily. So we're going to snap back and come back down more mean reverting. So take a look at the weekly on this. Same thing I talked about. If we don't see support here, we're going to be back down in this range. If we do see support, we're more than likely going to go back up, provided we continue to see strength in Canadian. GBP CHF. Oops, back to daily chart first. Still bouncing around the upper zone. GBP JPY still bouncing around in the upper zone. USD JPY. No surprise here, right? Why? Well, it's because the DXY is selling off, right? So the dollar's weakness has led to yen strength. Actually, do me can I'm gonna have you guys just on hold for 1 second. I gotta take this call from one of my big clients. Hang on a second. All right, so back in action. Tell you, I kind of feel bad for this client. His wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's. It's not been a good road for these two. I feel for him. In any case, USD CAD and daily, again, just this one just sort of baffles me because, I mean, take a look at the bigger picture of this whole thing. I mean, literally for a year, right? US dollar's value in relation to the Canadian it's been almost straight trend down decline. Methodical too. So it's, spent some time and then continued. Notice this base just tightening. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if the dollar continues lower, just to see this just go boom through here. In which case I would not want to take any longs right under this area. Just keep that in mind if you're trading this currency pair inside any software. USD CHF dollar or a daily chart here. The biggest insight to show you on this one. Cross here, you can see reversed us. These crosses are always important. I actually talk about this if you want on my Telegram channel. You can see the whole explanation of the crosses. Also, if you're new to this call and or do note that I have a new Telegram channel, so nothing's being posted at the old channel. We're still in the process of trying to get everybody migrated, which you can only do yourself, or you can only tell your friends to switch themselves over, subscribe to the new channel. We cannot migrate users from the old channel because I've gotten that question. And that channel is not owned by us. So we do not have the asset rights to that channel. We do the new one, hence why we're making the migration. Also USD. Daily chart, stuck in a tight range. Really a lot going on here. It's obviously increased in value as the dollar sold off. Pretty solid here though. PUD CAD almost looks the same, doesn't it? Aussie strengthening up versus Canadian, one of the few. It's continued to just step up in strength. Been pretty solid. Question I just had on GLD. Let me show you a spot. Look at the potentially break above the 1750 area. So we were accumulating stuff here, and especially in this double bottom pattern for clients. So we took clients probably up to about a 6-7 position, 6 to 7% position, as that one question, because we held. So if we can break here, we'll probably see a pretty decent rip. This is actually a nice addition. You're always looking for good chart patterns, something, especially if you get clients that are light in allocations to this, as we had. And, most chart patterns are the opposite. Everything looks like it just wants to roll over, especially in tech land. All right, so CAD JPY for the question I had. We're there. So CAD's really gotten ahead of itself, as you can see, over the last year. So if I were to overlay any kind of stretched bands above this, probably running right through here. So we were getting stretched, reverting back to the mean a little bit. So for those stuck in any drawdown from software taking trades up here as longs, you did well. Shorts, you're doing much better. GBP NZD, still stuck in that range. So the concept I'm going to talk about on Saturday, everybody, if you want to sort of share some insights, say, hey, Steve was talking about what's going to chat about for essentially 30 minutes on Saturday in between a whole mess of other presenters. And I think the thing that's really been impressive about this company is just the level of professionalism, no BS, everything's being shot in a professional studio. You get to see my ugly face in 4K. Hopefully they don't have the camera too close to me. And then, but it's the content I think is what's most important. So myself and Susan, our director of marketing, will be focusing on diversification. I'll be focusing on risk. Both of those two presentations sort of meld together in that it's exceptionally important to understand risk management first as it relates to portfolio management, trading, just money in general, right? So I'll talk all about that. But I also have a little surprise at the end of a how to get wealthy, something that is actually I've seen in place from a couple of individuals. They're good friends of mine that followed this exact same process, and these guys are doing really well. One of them's just cracked 7 figures in his trading account. Um, with the help of a little bit of crypto too. So these guys have convinced me to change my tune and take a look at a little bit of crypto. So I'm starting to get into that as well. I think I'm hoping the firm can, we can get some interest in that as well. The problem with this, it's much traded, tougher to trade this stuff, especially with the lack of consistency many of these trading exchanges have in terms of what they call their latency. So these a lot of these exchanges go down a lot, and that's just not something you even really ever care about in trading futures or trading stock plans, because the exchanges in this country and in Europe, they're very solid and there's very low latency. And the most of the time, in the course of a given year, they're up and active. And I can't recall the last time an exchange had a latency issue. So, and it's much more of the Wild West in crypto land. And I think that companies emerging like Coinbase, which is now publicly traded, and a couple of the others out there, I think it's time to maybe take a closer look for the layperson to bring a smaller allocation of one's money into crypto. And certainly if you're buying some of these altcoins or anything that's in DeFi land, or if a lot of these terms don't make sense to you, we're going to probably have an educational piece brought in about crypto, which I know we'll be talking this week about some of our corporate meetings before we shoot live on Saturday. So I would encourage you guys to have everybody attend this event. We're seeing some big numbers in signups, which is cool, but we want to see the numbers double, triple where they are. So spread the word, everybody. Have a great week, and I will see you hopefully live on Saturday. Be well.